China and Russia on Thursday blocked an effort to impose tougher sanctions on North Korea at the United Nations Security Council that was led by the U.S. after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un conducted a spate of missile tests this year, including the launch of several intercontinental ballistic missiles. Both China and Russia hold veto powers at the UN Security Council, which they exercised after the introduction of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea's official name for the test with more restrictive sanctions. China's ambassador to the UN, Sang Jun, said at the UN meeting on Thursday that the reason why today's draft resolution failed to pass was because the US has failed to accept proposals other than implementing sanctions. Had refused, to accept proposals other than implementing sanctions. China's voting position is based on our assessment as to whether a proposal contributes to a solution, Zhang said. Perhaps some people wanted nothing but this situation based on their cynical intentions. The US and South Korea led the push in recent weeks for the UN to impose tougher sanctions on North Korea, following more than 15 missile launches from the regime this year. If the effort had passed, the UN would have toughened sanctions on North Korea for the first time since 2017. Following President Biden's visit to East Asia over the weekend, North Korea fired at least three ballistic missiles of its off of its east coast Wednesday morning local time. Tensions between Russia and the U.S. have mounted amid the war in Ukraine, while U.S.-China relations have been strained over Taiwan status and China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims and other minority groups in the country, among other reasons. Russia and China proposed a counter-resolution that would have eased sanctions on North Korea over humanitarian concerns, given that the country has teetered on the brink of a famine and is reportedly in the midst of a COVID-19 outbreak. But U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, slammed both nations for the proposal earlier this month, saying this council would not stand for it. On Thursday, Thomas Greenfield said Kim has launched 6 intercontinental ballistic missiles while Russia and China's veto protects North Korea, despite the nation violating UN Security Council policy. So China can explain along with Russia their actions to the General Assembly, the U.S. ambassador said in brief remarks. The number of missile tests this year have also alarmed North Korea's neighbors Japan and South Korea. Biden met with South Korea's newly elected president and with Japan's prime minister during his visit to East Asia. South Korean ambassador to UN Oh Jun said the resolution imposing tougher sanctions was long overdue. This could send the wrong signal to both the DPRK and other nuclear proliferating nations that they can do whatever they want with impunity, Oh said. Unchecked provocations will only embolden the DPRK's continued escalatory behavior. So it's been established, or rather I've discussed before, that China and Russia despise the U.S. for reasons that have been made very apparent to people that follow the news with any regularity. China doesn't like the U.S., or I guess us, if I'm speaking in that manner, because we're the other major superpower. We try to go after them on humanitarian issues like their treatment of the Uyghur Muslims, even though we do, whatever. So those two things primarily are why China generally finds itself on the opposing side of us when it comes to international relations. And in the case of Russia, I mean, before we were accusing them of trying to steal our election or meddle with our election. We can all remember the Russiagate scandal, but pretty much their biggest and most prominent reason for disliking us and being against us when we propose something is our intervention in their Ukraine invasion. That being said, I kind of find myself on the side of Russia and China on this issue. I've said before, I didn't like the sanctions the U.S. put on Russia because they went after regular people. You had bank accounts being frozen with, visas refusing to do business with people that lived in Russia. Just stuff that went too far, that went after people who don't run their government. And I think a pretty similar position has to be taken with North Korea. If you want to sanction Kim Jong-un and all the other officials over there, you won't see any opposition from me. But the U.S. wants to sanction regular people in North Korea, who have nothing to do with the missile test. And I think there was a good point made that at a time when they're now becoming transparent with the fact that people have caught COVID over there, maybe you should ease up on them. You know, at least the regular people that live there. If you want to sanction the dictator and his buddies, his cronies, you can go ahead, but at least leave the regular people in peace. Um, my favorite statement is a little bit down here where you get the South Korean ambassador to the UN. He says, uh, "Unchecked provocations will only embolden the DPRK's continued escalatory behavior." And that's only funny because that country is on our side, South Korea, as far as supporting sanctioning North Korea because of the nuclear test. And you know, it's funny because it's like the grandstanding of this is a violation of international law. Well, you look at all the human rights violations the U.S. has, and it still goes unabated. You know, it. I mean, it's just every time I listen to something from the UN and I see them trying to give these speeches where they try to convince you that this particular country has crossed the line because they broke this rule, and then you look at the person they're on the side of and they're doing the exact same stuff. I mean, you know, I can't see how a country that aligns itself with a nation like the US, which will sanction innocent people in countries that it's feuding with, will bomb innocent people in countries that it's sending soldiers to, can sit here and try to convince me that we need to really go after the North Koreans because they keep testing these missiles that all of these other countries have, but we only care about them because they're not one of our allies. Just a complete joke. And I don't like to be against the US. I don't like to sit here and say, yes, Russia and China, two countries that I'm just going to admit probably are not approaching this with the best of intentions, as in there's a good chance that a lot of their aligning with North Korea is because the US doesn't like them. So they're, you know, it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Uh, but I think they make a reasonable point. This country's got a whole bunch of people who now are catching this disease to where they're finally being public about it, and you're going to sanction those people and make their lives even harder. So I'm on the side of not sanctioning the North Koreans. I'm glad that Russia and China blocked this. I just don't like it when innocent people are gone after because they happen to live in, you know, region X or Y. So you won't see any complaints from me on this policy by those two nations, even if I know and can reasonably infer they're probably not doing it because they care so much about North Korean citizens.